Hi everyone, this is Mindy Eggen. Welcome back to my channel. I'm excited to be a part of the Altenew video hop. We have some giveaways for you, so be sure to leave a comment down below in the video descriptions and also on the Altenew video. I will have more information about that and a link to the next video in the hop listed down below in the video description. In today's video, I'm going to introduce to you Altenew's Pigment Inks, and I'll show you how I ink blend with them. Now, Pigment Inks, there are lots of different things that you can do with them, but my first go-to technique is ink blending, and that was what I wanted to try, and I'll do it on two different kinds of cardstock. So first we're going to take a look at the Pigment Inks. This is the look of them. There are 8 colors. We have Forest Glades, Frayed Leaf, Evergreen, Coral Berry, Frosty Pink, Grapevine, Ruby Red, and Jet Black. Now immediately you can see a difference. They are in clear cases here, so you can definitely see your color through the top of the lid. And one of the features I love about these cases is that they are stackable, like really stackable. And what I mean by that is there is like a little lip on them, and I'll bring it closer to the camera here in just a moment to show you that. But you can stack these really nice on your desk and not worrying about bumping it and tipping it over, which I'm a klutz. So I loved this. You can see I'm wiggling it. There's a little bit of a lip there, so it kind of locks into place a little bit to help prevent any of those tipping over. So in my small cluttered space, this is a huge bonus feature for me. Now, as far as the pads go on these, I would consider this a firm foam pad, meaning that when I stamp my image into this pad, it's not going to sink in, but is definitely a different feel than a felt pad, which is what most dye inks have. Another bonus to stamping with your Pigment Inks is they give very good crisp results. Here are some images that I had stamped out using the Balloon Bunch stamp set. So I just went through all the different colors, stamped them up. I was experimenting layering different colors. I also experimented with stamping them on black cardstock and on craft cardstock. You can see on the black they don't show up as well. Some of the lighter colors were really hard to see on craft, but I love that coral berry on craft. That just really stood out. It kept very true to its color. And then here are some layering stamping that I did with the different colors. So you can see they stamp on top of each other very nicely and show the true color very well. Now I'm going to show you how I stamped with these, and you can see for yourself the results that you get. I am just stamping one of these balloons from the Balloon Bunch stamp set. I'm just using an acrylic block, lightly tapping that on top of the ink pad, and you get beautiful coverage right away. You can see if you missed any spots, and I'll stamp that down onto some white cardstock, and look at that. It stamps beautifully on that first try. Now, the thing about them though is that because they are a pigment ink, I kind of think of it as paint, so it's very thick, which means that it's going to take a little longer to dry. That has pros and cons to it. You either can heat that with a heat tool to dry it, or we can emboss with it. Now I'm cleaning the stamp, and I wanted to show you that these did not stain my stamps. So another bonus to using Pigment Inks. Now for my project today, I am going to be using this gorgeous large image from the Courageous Use stamp set. Lots of different things you can do with this stamp set. I'm just using it in a real simple card to kind of experiment with some ink blending. So I'm lining this up in my MISTI. I'm using 2 MISTI corners to push my cardstock towards more of the middle of my MISTI stamping tool. So that way, if any is hanging off of the cardstock, I have room for that, and it's not going to get stuck on the edge of the MISTI. So once I have that, picked it up with the door of my MISTI, I'm prepping my cardstock with an anti-static powder tool, and then I'm going to use the Jet Black pigment ink. Now you can use any of the inks to do this. I just tend to lean towards black. That's one of my go-to colors. So once I have that completely covered, and I'm going to give this pressure all over the flower, I don't want to miss any spots. You'll be able to see what a beautiful clean impression this is. Now because the pigment ink stays wet longer, I can go ahead and add some clear embossing powder to this, and then I'll heat that up with my heat tool. You can see it has kind of a foggy look to it, but as we melt that embossing powder, you're going to get these beautiful crisp lines. And this would also be great for watercoloring or any other type of mixed media art that you work with. The white cardstock that I stamped on, I was using Bristol Smooth cardstock because I wanted to do some ink blending. Now I'm going to show you how this is going to look on craft cardstock. And I think actually the craft cardstock may have been my favorite. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to stamp that down with that jet black pigment ink, cover that in the clear embossing powder, and then heat set that. So I'll be working on 2 cards at the same time just so you can see the difference between the 2. Now that that's heat set that, I'm going to ink blend these onto my white cardstock. I'm starting off first with the Frosty Pink. So this is a really light pink. I'm using just a little finger dauber to apply my ink. Now when I'm doing this, I am not really worried about staying in the lines too much. So if I go over, I wasn't looking for perfection here. I just want to give it this soft feel and see how these blended. So just adding that really light color kind of as a base layer, tapping off any of the excess ink onto the side there. And I'm going to do the same thing onto the craft cardstock. So just applying that really light layer. You can see it's a lot lighter looking on the craft, but you can still see that it's a light pink. Then once I have that first layer down, I'm going to come in with Coral Berry, and I think the Coral Berry is probably one of my favorite colors. It's also my favorite out of a regular ink line, but it's gorgeous as well in a pigment ink. So once again, kind of tapping off any of the excess first off on the side, and then coming into the flower, you can see it's very bold, very bright, very thick. And I'm starting from the center of the flower, working my way out. I didn't want to go all the way to the edge. I wanted to still kind of highlight that frosty pink. So I can always go back and forth, and just seeing it come alive like this on that cardstock. And it does the same thing on the craft. Now I kept going with the white cardstock. I was kind of on a roll creating my flower. So this one I believe is using the ruby red, and I'm adding that just to the center of the flowers. I come back in a little bit with the Coral Berry, kind of soften those edges up to complete that flower portion. And then I'll repeat those same steps on the craft. Now the pigment ink, it does say on the underside of the ink pads that they are, you can use them on paper, fabric, wood, and tons more. It is also water-based. So one of the things that I wanted to try is watercoloring with these. So that's kind of next on my to-do list. Now, one of the questions I kind of ask myself when I see companies come out with pigment inks is, why would I want pigment inks? Like, I have a ton of inks. Why do I need pigment inks? And like I said, ink blending is one of the first things I go to. So that is what I was playing with. Comparing this to other types of inks, I use a lot of oxides, which leave kind of a chalky finish. I use a lot of regular distress inks, which are very bright. Now, what I'm finding compared to pigment inks, pigment ink, this one I'm not seeing as being very chalky. So you're getting a really nice, bright, bold color out of this line. They also ink blend extremely well. I mean, like it's beautiful how they ink blend. Like I said, the only downfall when it comes to it is having to wait for that ink to dry, because if I were to take my finger across this, it's going to smudge it. So wait time, I'm not usually a very patient person, but I really do love how these blend. So that's just one of the things that I'm noticing when it comes to pigment ink. So I really enjoyed creating these cards with that. Now, because we heat emboss this, that embossing is going to resist that ink, and we'll be able to wipe that excess ink off later. Now I'm going to use the Mega Label Love stamp set. Huge, huge fan of this label look. So I'm going to pick out 2 of them and just stamp this onto some white cardstock. I'm going to line it up as straight as I can. And then I'm going to use the jet black pigment ink once again. Now these can be done in any of the colors that I showed you. I just tend to lean towards the black. Don't push too hard with the ink pad because of the fine lines of this font. You don't want to squish ink into those lines. So just carefully stamping those. And then once again, I'll sprinkle on the clear embossing powder and heat set that. And that's just going to make that pop a little bit more and have a little bit of a shine to it. I'll show you my trick for cutting these perfectly. So what I'll do is line this up in my paper trimmer. I'm lining up the bottom of that sentiment block with the edge of my guard on my paper trimmer. And then I can cut these. That's going to give me perfect spacing around the entire label. So I'll just kind of move my labels, line up the edge of that block, the sentiment block, with my plastic clear guard there, and then cut. So all of my labels will have the exact same width around them, and I'll have that beautiful white border. So I'll do that for both of these sentiments. After that's done, I can come in with a rag or a paper towel and I'll buff off any of that excess ink that was resisting the heat and embossing, resisting that ink. So just kind of picking that up a little bit. And now here I have 4 pieces of cardstock cut to 3 3/4 by 5 inches, which is the same size that I cut my stamped panel down to. I am going to adhere all of these panels together, and what that's doing is just adding dimension to my panel. I do plan on adding this to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white piece of cardstock, and the reason I'm layering up these panels is I want dimension, but I haven't been happy with the look of foam tape behind it. So using the Jennifer McGuire tip, I went with this option and I've really been liking it. So after I have all of those panels adhered together and my stamped panel, I'm going to attach that to my white card front. And I'll repeat the same steps for my craft one as well. So they'll each have a little bit of dimension. Then I'll use the foam tape to adhere the sentiment to, because that fits pretty well behind the entire sentiment piece. So I will add both of these sentiments to the front of my cards, and that will finish off the cards for you. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this gave you some ideas on things you can do with the pigment inks. Like I said, I'm a big ink blender, so I was really happy with the results on this and can't wait to try some backgrounds with it as well. All of the supplies will be listed down below in the video description, along with the next person in the hop. And like I said earlier, be sure to leave comments along the hop, give the designers some love, and I would love to know which card of this was your favorite. Did you like the craft or did you like the white card? Thank you so much for stopping by today, and I'll see you next time.